Welcome,
We are now
everyone,
recording. Sorry.
and good morning to all. We're gathering online this morning for worship due to the icy conditions and very cold temperatures. We begin our service with a recording of Morning Has Come.
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Once more the gift is here. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life above. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Welcome to this online worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Angela Orbaugh. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm grateful to be leading worship this morning with Reverend Tim Timerson. Many thanks to the AV Tech Nash Ford for managing this morning's online service. Whoever you are and wherever you have come from, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville welcomes you. We are glad that you have joined us this morning and appreciate all who have made this moment of our gathering possible. Now, we offer a special welcome to newcomers with us this morning, and we are so glad that you have joined us. We are asking everyone to remain muted this morning for our worship time together, but I do invite you to take a moment to greet others by putting a note in the chat box and by looking at each other on our screens and waving. We now have greetings from Treasurer Jimmy Gorham.
Hello. Thank you, Angela. It was so wonderful to hear that uplifting song and to see the scenes of what looks like a very warm beach. And I'll just leave it at that. But what I'm on the board. I am the treasurer, as Angela mentioned, and I have an announcement to make about a couple of weeks from now. On Sunday, February 15th, we'll be hosting a social action fair in the social hall after the service, assuming we're all at the church. And we will be visited by over 15 organizations whose missions center on criminal justice or environmental justice. And you can learn about how these groups address the challenges that we in this congregation hold as very most vital. If you visit all the tables, you might win a door prize. So there's that. So thank you for being here today, and I look forward to the rest of the service.
Thank you, Jimmy. Here are this morning's announcements. Due to the lingering effects of the ice storm, please be sure to check our church website to see if any church-sponsored events this week may be postponed, rescheduled, or canceled. Now, following today's service, the UU Seville Mosaic Squad will host an online gathering focusing on how we can take steps to resist authoritarianism. We hope that you will stay online after worship and join us for this important conversation. Next Sunday is our annual PJs and Pancakes celebration. If you like, you are invited to wear your favorite PJs to church and join us after service for a delicious pancake breakfast. Next Sunday, the Christian Fellowship will also meet. They will meet in the parlor after the service, and they will be discussing the parable of the prodigal son. Now, this is Luke 15, 11 through 32, and all are welcome. Looking for community and winter family-friendly activities? There are still a few seats remaining for fall auction events in February and in March. So we have open seats in spa night for busy moms, chocolate fondue and movie night, Legos and pasta, vegan cooking lessons, and pie night. And I saw some photos online from the first vegan cooking lesson event, and it looked fabulous. So for the details and to purchase a seat, you can visit the auction website. You can get to that by going to our website, and the top menus along the top, there's one that says stewardship. Click stewardship, and underneath there you will find auction. You can also find a link in our newsletter as well. Women Spirit in Bulk gathering is Monday, February 9th. The celebration of In Bulk is honoring the hearth space. So we will be gathering in the lower hall 2 and not the labyrinth at 6:30 to celebrate the first stirrings of life underground as we ease into early spring. You can contact Women's Spirit at ucharlottesville.org with any questions.
Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad that we made the decision to let everybody stay home and stay safe and tucked in. I was at church yesterday. We had a memorial service. The parking lots were a little better. We did manage to put some stuff down. Sorry if that's too technical of a term, but it's still slippery out there, and the street parking is not good. And so I think this was a good call to just let's stay home again. Hopefully next Sunday we will be in person. And once again, you can wear your PJs, as I'm sure some of you are now. So anyway, welcome. It's wonderful to see you. So Angela and I would like to begin this morning with a call to worship that I've adapted from the great mystic and writer and spiritual leader, Howard Thurman. Give us the courage to live, to really live, and to not merely exist, to live resiliently, ever changing, ever growing, ever adapting.
Give us the courage to go on eagerly, joyously, without anger or fear or regret, taking what life gives.
With heads held high and spirits winged and soaring, give us the courage to live.
Come, let us worship together. I will now light our flaming chalice. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, I invite you to light yours as well. So will you please join me in saying our chalice lighting words? We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together. And now you can also join me in doing the hand motions. Your hand is the matchbook, your finger is the match. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of open minds. This is the church of helping hands. This is a church of loving hearts. Our opening hymn today is hymn number 155, Circle Round for Freedom.
Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole. Circle round for freedom, circle round for peace, for all of us imprisoned, circle for release, circle for the planet, circle for each soul, for the children of our children, keep the circle whole.
We are an interconnected community that cares for one another. Part of how we embody this care is by making time each week to share the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts. Here are the joys and sorrows that were submitted prior to this morning's service. In addition, please feel free to add your joy or sorrow into the chat box. Those in need of support can contact the pastoral care team at pastoral@uucharlottesville.org.
Thank you, Angela. So we are going to hear a reflection from Reverend Kathleen Rollens now. And many of you know Kathleen, married to, of course, our former minister, Wayne Arneson, a fabulous, wonderful, and distinguished Unitarian Universalist minister. And Kathleen attended the protests in Minneapolis and shared very briefly last Sunday about what the experience was like. But I thought it would be really important today to hear from Kathleen at greater length. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Kathleen and invite you, Kathleen, to share your reflection and experience about your time in Minneapolis.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Tim and Reverend Leah, for the invitation to speak. And happy Black History Month, by the way. It is so good to be with you all this morning. As someone said before the service got started, thanks to whoever invented Zoom. And it's really good, as so many of us have been dealing with the combination of snow and ice. In fact, some of you, my car's been stuck in the parking lot with the ice surrounding it make it, the ice was just is still very thick and deep and seemingly impenetrable. But 10 days ago, I confronted a different kind of ice when on Thursday, January 21st, and Friday, January 22nd, some 1,200 clergy from all over the country, and by some records, 50,000 citizen resistors gathered for nonviolent training and a massive demonstration on the streets of downtown Minneapolis, demanding that ICE and federal agents in Minneapolis and Minnesota get out of the state now. So I'm not by nature what I call a megaphone minister. I don't like crowds. I'm not a fan of chants and slogans. I fear mob mentality, even when the crowd gathers for a cause that I believe in. But this time, when the call came out to Unitarian Universalist clergy to converge upon Minneapolis for a day of training, grounded in prayer and song, and a day of witness and solidarity against Operation Metro Surge, it was personal because I served as the interim senior minister at Unitarian Congregation in St. Paul for 2 years. And in those 2 years, I grew to know and love the people of Minnesota. So I wanted to show up for my colleagues and for the good people of the Twin Cities who have been daily traumatized, daily by Operation Metro Surge. And I wanted to add my body to the other bodies marching like a forceful flowing river of resistance through the streets of Minneapolis in minus 20-degree temperature. Honestly, it was the coldest I have ever been in my life. And I've been to Gimli, Manitoba in January, and that is pretty darn cold. But there is a cold that far surpassed the temperatures. And that is the cold-hearted jackboot tactics of this administration. So our mission was twofold. First, to send a clear and unequivocal message that Minnesotans want ICE and the federal agents who were sent to harass and terrorize immigrants out of the state. And the second reason was to bear witness and to hear stories of people affected by this reign of terror. And I have to tell you, the stories came tumbling out. One taxi driver told us that ICE agents would call for a Lyft or an Uber, and if the driver's name sounded foreign, or if they were brown or black-skinned or spoke with an accent, they would arrest them without warrant or process, leaving their car running. Another person told us about how churches had set up food aid distribution centers, particularly in Somali or Hispanic communities. So ICE set up a bogus station in one of the neighborhoods, invited members of the immigrant community to come to get free food and supplies, and then would apprehend them. These are just two of the many stories we heard from people on the ground in Minneapolis. The tactics are incomprehensibly deceptive, devious, and frankly, evil. So, since coming back from Minneapolis, I've been following posts from my colleagues as well as comments that represent this administration's point of view. I try to get out of my bubble to hear what others are saying. And in one of my feeds, some people have posted, but ICE and Border Patrol wouldn't have to be there if the immigrants were there legally. I've thought about how that respect the law attitude applies to what's happening in Minnesota, and I have at least two responses. And you know these. But first, ICE agents and Border Patrol are apprehending people without warrants, without checking their immigration status, without any kind of due process. That is not respect for law. It is racially profiling people of color. And then second, while I was serving in St. Paul, we had 3 employees of the church whom the church was supporting morally and financially and legally through the legal process of getting a green card. In one case, It is still ongoing. Two of those three are still ongoing. It's been 7 years, mounds of paperwork, thousands of dollars in legal fees. So I know firsthand the barriers to legal citizenship, and they are increasingly impossible to navigate for deserving, law-abiding people who are not wealthy or native English speakers, or who don't have a congregation or an employer who is got the resources to support them. So, as we all know, this massive surge of law enforcement was not designed to remove dangerous criminals from the streets of the Twin Cities and beyond. Its intention was to deliberately, systematically break the spirit of the people of Minnesota. And after living there for 2 years and being present with the resistance last week, I can tell you that will not, and that will never happen. Because what I learned and witnessed 10 days ago is that there are so many ways that the resistance is on full display. In the midst of the march, the one on Friday through the streets of Minneapolis in the freezing cold temperatures, I saw a woman passing out pans of bayos, which is the Somali version of hot fried triangles filled with lentils and other deliciousness. We use them as food and as hand and even as nose warmers. I saw costumes and puppet artists and musicians and drummers and sign makers and risk takers and counselors and weavers and bakers and donut makers. It was both the worst of what humankind is capable of and the very, very best. There were agents with guns and tactical gear, and there was fear and trauma and heartbreak. And there was laughter and hugs and songs sung in native tongues and joy. It was beloved community, a community who knew that something very precious is at stake, greater than democracy even. It was the vision of beloved community that holds the deep-seated awareness that I am you and you are me. And we meet in this vast sea of human care. The small stories of human care, they don't grab the headlines. I was outside an Aldi with other colleagues, and I spoke to an elementary school teacher, and she asked us why we were there and why were we wearing these yellow robes, stoles. And we told her we were there in solidarity with the people of Minnesota. And she told us that she was at Aldi's to buy toilet paper for a family who was too afraid to leave their home. And when I expressed my admiration, she smiled and shrugged and she said, it's just what we do for our neighbors. And then there was the man who drove the van from my car rental place to the airport. And as he was loading my suitcase in the back of the van, he saw my ice out signs. And then when we got to the airport, as he took my suitcase to the curb, he asked if he could give me a hug. And I said, sure. And he wiped tears from his eyes and he said, thank you for coming. I didn't know there could be so much kindness in the world. I didn't know there could be so much kindness in the world. So what's happening in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in cities all over the country right now is indeed the loud and angry resistance of authoritarian military intervention in an American city that you have seen on the videos. And it's also a resistance against cruelty, pettiness, vindictiveness, and hard-heartedness as exemplified by this administration. It is also a resistance of kindness represented by people in neighborhoods all over the Twin Cities who are looking out for each other and protecting each other, and by so many clergy of all faiths that came to Minnesota last week as a reminder of what actually makes America great, our shared defense, of liberty and justice for all. There are so many lessons to be learned from this experience, and it's ones that I know I'll be processing in my prayer life for a long, long time. And none of us know yet how this time in our history will be depicted in the history books. But I hope that it's not just the numbers who showed up or the speeches that were made or who won or who lost. In my personal history, I'm going to remember the actions of ordinary Minnesotans who do what they do. They'll pull your car out of a ditch. They'll buy you toilet paper. They'll give you a hug, hand warmers, a cup of coffee, and they'll tell you, it's just what we do. And it's important to remember that we don't do this resistance work alone. Before I left, I asked to borrow one of these stoles, and Reverend Leah graciously loaned me hers. But before she gave it to me, she paused and she put her hands on it and she said, "You are carrying this congregation with you." Minnesotans have their neighbors' backs, and this congregation had mine. And this ice that's covering our land right now, it's not going to last forever, because even the most seemingly impenetrable ice will break apart and melt and dissolve under the heat of our fierce commitment to the values we share and the love we generate. So thank you for letting me share some of my experience. Thank you, Reverend Leah, for your stole, and I'm grateful to be among you.
Okay. This community offers its love and support to what is closest to our hearts. Another way that we show our care for one another is in sharing our financial gifts with our community and our congregation. Our social action collection for the month of February is for UU Seville's food ministry. And here to tell us about this is our very own Elizabeth Breeden.
Oh, how do you follow? My sister lives in Minneapolis, and I hear this story daily. And indeed, it is the story of a group of people standing up and resisting as only Minnesota people can. Our own church has a social action collection every month. And interestingly, we have 4 groups who reach out with social justice personally by the congregants of our congregation. We host Pachem, and the people who participate in that hosting pay for the supplies that create that hosting. The hospital meal packets are put together by the children, and we raise a collection for them to have the supplies. The soup kitchen is also funded by the members who participate, and the food pantry is this month's collection, and it uses the money to hand out food in our church parking lot the first Friday of each month. We also send volunteers to support Sin Bararas, City of Promise, FAR, The Haven, and Impact, and raise money for those institutions. And you just heard Jimmy talk about how there are 2 more social justice groups that we want to pick that represent both environmental justice and criminal justice. So that will be that fair on the 15th. But the food pantry is basically funded. Most of our money is spent at the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, who deliver the food on the first Friday of the month to the Summit House parking lot, and about 10 to 15 volunteers receive that food and lay it out, separating the US or annotating the USDA versus the food that the food pantry receives as donations from grocery stores and individuals. And we buy that food at 11 cents a pound. So that's where our money is going. USDA is free. The clients we see are an average of 90 90 people are fed each month. And that represents an average of 23 families. We're ready for 30 families, so that's how we buy our food. We spend about $188 a month, which isn't much, but that's average is skewed because the food bank has given us some scholarships. So they gave us $2,000 to buy food from. But we use another $300 a month to buy cleaning supplies and personal care products so that our customers can receive things the food bank does not supply. We've considered purchasing more vegetables, but we haven't had a good source. And the St. Andrews Gleaning Project brings us vegetables from their gleaning. So our vegetables ebb and flow in their perfectness. Your generosity has allowed us to serve those in our community who are experiencing food scarcity with warmth and a personal connection that extends our hospitality and outreach to the wider community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Nash, could you show us the social action slide for giving for those who would like to financially support our food ministry? Thank you. Now, in addition to giving online, if you would like to give by check, please make your checks out to UU Congregation of Charlottesville and write Social Action Collection or Food Ministry in the memo line. Checks can be mailed or dropped off at the church office. Along with our social action collection, we invite everyone to financially support the ministries and mission of this community. Through your pledges and the weekly Sunday morning offering, together, our financial gifts support UUCville and enable us to put love into action. This is our shared ministry. You can offer your financial support using the text address or going to our website. And you may place your cash or checks into an envelope and mail them or bring them by the church office. Let us now dedicate all of the many gifts we share with one another by saying, we accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good. Our reading today is an excerpt from Letter from Birmingham Jail by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King wrote the letter in April 1963 while imprisoned for engaging in nonviolent protest and in response to a letter written by the white liberal clergy calling for moderation and criticizing the civil rights movement for violating the law. He says, "My dear fellow clergy, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling our present activities unwise and untimely. It seems you have also been especially influenced by the argument that we are outsiders coming in. I simply want you to know that I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all." In your statement, you also express a great deal of anxiety over our willingness to break laws. And you may well ask, how can we advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer is found in the fact that there are two types of laws: just laws and unjust laws. A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law and with God's law, while an unjust law is a code that is out of harmony with the moral law. Any law that uplifts human personality is moral and just. Any law that degrades human personality is unjust. In no sense do I advocate evading or defying all laws. That would lead to anarchy. But one who breaks an unjust law to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is expressing the highest form of respect for law.
Thank you, Angela. Letter from Birmingham Jail, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 1963. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. I hope you have or are surviving all the snow and ice. I know it has been and remains difficult for many of us. I do want to give a special shout out to the church members who responded to a text and an email I sent out earlier this week, volunteering to help clear driveways and walkways for elders in our congregation. I can't begin to tell you how much it warmed my heart when my inbox just filled with so many offers of help that I quite frankly couldn't keep track of all of them. That outpouring of love is exactly what this congregation is all about. Now, on a lighter note, speaking of surviving the snow and ice, I feel compelled to share an image that was created and posted on our Instagram page announcing that we were having today's service online due to icy conditions created by our communications committee. Nash, why don't you show that? Yes, that's me. Slipping and falling on my you know what. Now, of course, that's a created image. That didn't really happen. And but I will say that I did awaken this morning to some, thank you, I see all the laughter. I did awaken this morning to some imaginary lower back pain, even though, of course, I did not take a fall on the ice. Well, I'm imagining hearing roaring laughter in the sanctuary. So thank you for all the emojis. And I'm assuming that was created by the fabulous Jude Bias, who is has a little fun with me and a little with Reverend Leah on Instagram sometimes. So yes, indeed. So anyway, thank you, Jude. I got a laugh out of it. Reverend Leah wants to create a poster. I don't really think that's a great idea, but anyway. All right, now on to more serious matters. So let me just begin by thanking my good friend and colleague and teacher, Reverend Kathleen Rollens, for a beautiful and inspiring reflection about her experience in Minneapolis. I've known Kathleen since we both served UU congregations in Northeast Ohio. And many of you probably aren't aware that in my very first few years as a UU minister, when I was a baby UU minister, Kathleen served as my mentor. I am so delighted that she is now part of our congregation and very grateful that Kathleen and Lenore Bajar Dukes answered the call to be in solidarity with the people of Minneapolis. Kathleen, I have to say that what you learned about ICE and I assume Border Patrol's tactics, including things like tricking and then detaining Uber and Lyft drivers and pretending to feed immigrant families at phony food centers or stations, only then to detain them, I'm sorry to say, is both unsurprising and infuriating. I'm also really glad that you shared the story about that van driver who was moved to tears that so many had come to Minneapolis, yourself included, and simply told you, I didn't know there could be so much kindness in the world. Yes, indeed. And I heartily agree that what you and so many who are showing up and speaking out across our country, what you're offering is indeed a resistance of kindness. Now, Kathleen also mentioned an argument often used to justify mass deportations, as well as the cruel tactics of ICE and Border Patrol. Well, you know, they broke our laws. They have no respect for our laws, which I take to mean that undocumented immigrants who may cross a border without proper documentation or overstay a visa, that these folks broke the law, so therefore they should be deported. And it is that argument that I want to talk about today. And it's that argument that leads me to consider the relationship between and the meanings of law and justice, between what is legal and what is just. In so much of the rhetoric about illegal immigration, law and justice are viewed as being one and the same, meaning our laws are just simply because they are on the books. Now, look, I want to make it clear that I believe in the rule of law. And I think, as Kathleen pointed out, many of those in government who make this law and order argument make it very conveniently and don't seem to be following the rule of law in many other aspects of their leadership. But some laws are unjust and unfair, as Dr. King points out, including and especially laws that are so clearly aimed at harming and excluding people because of the color of their skin, their country of origin, their gender identity, their economic circumstances, and those kinds of laws, which are so blatantly unjust. They must be challenged, and yes, sometimes even broken, so that they can be changed. Now, I must also say that the rule or respect for law argument rings rather hollow in a nation whose history is riddled with unjust and discriminatory laws that favor some and harm others. A nation in which slavery, Jim Crow, the dispossession of Native American lands, the exclusion of certain immigrant communities because of their race or nation of origin, the subjugation of women, violence and discrimination against the LGBTQ community, the list goes on. And all of these systems were legal and sanctioned by law. Now, I have to say, I don't think anyone has articulated the glaring gap between law and justice more effectively than Dr. King did in Letter from Birmingham Jail. For those who are unfamiliar with the situation in Birmingham in the spring of 1963 and in the months and years leading up to that, under the leadership of the notorious, and this is quite a title, Public Safety Commissioner, Eugene Bull Connor, Birmingham was one of the most violent and racist cities in the segregated South. In fact, there were so many acts of violence and terrorism against the African American community in Birmingham that the city acquired a notorious but well-deserved nickname, Bombingham. Now, the nonviolent campaign that Dr. King led got off to a slow start, and it was the need to re-energize the movement in the campaign that led him to decide to cross a police barricade so that he would be arrested and sent to jail. And it was while he was sitting in that narrow jail cell in Birmingham that King learned of the public statement issued by a group of liberal and moderate white clergy. I think we have a picture of that, a famous picture of Dr. King sitting in that jail cell. The statement rebuked Dr. King and the nonviolent movement for provoking extremism and unrest, for breaking the law, and for being in too much of a hurry and not patiently waiting for justice. After reading that statement, Dr. King began writing a reply, first along the margins of a newspaper that he had. And that became the Letter from Birmingham Jail. In the letter, Dr. King responds to the white clergy's rebuke by reminding them that not all laws are just. A just law, according to Dr. King, uplifts human personality, while an unjust law degrades it. So for Dr. King, justice cannot be defined or understood simply by the laws and legalities of the day. Justice truly is about morality and human dignity. Now, I think any effort to understand Dr. King's conception of justice must begin with the experience of African Americans living under the tyranny of segregation. Segregation, as he says, distorts the soul and damages the personality. To illustrate the harm unjust laws do to human personality in the letter from Birmingham jail, Dr. King shares a heart-wrenching story about his daughter. One day she asked if he would take her to an amusement park she had seen advertised on television. Dr. King recalls having to tell his daughter that he could not take her because Funtown was for whites only. As Dr. King recalls, he watched, and I'm quoting here, he watched tears well up in her little eyes and depressing clouds of inferiority and bitterness begin to form in her little mental sky. And let me just say as an aside, the tears and clouds that Dr. King's daughter experienced, I can't help but those tears remind me of young Leon Ramos, the 5-year-old boy who was used as bait by ICE in Minneapolis to arrest his father. He and his father were sent to a detention facility, and while there, I understand 5-year-old Liam became sick and very, very depressed. Now, I understand, and actually I just saw in the chat from Kelsey Calgar that a judge ordered Liam and his father released from the detention facility in Texas, and that they are now back home in Minneapolis. I can only hope that young Liam will get the help he needs and the justice he deserves to heal the trauma that our government has inflicted on him and his family, all in the name of respecting the law. While unjust laws often inflict terror and create a sense of what Dr. King called nobodiness, just laws, of course, do the opposite. They liberate and uplift all people. They enable people to flourish, to grow, and to live into the fullness of their humanity. A just legal system treats people equally and does not favor those with economic or other privileges. Just laws empower all people to live from a place of hope and possibility, not fear and despair. You know, every time I read the letter from Birmingham jail, I find myself wishing we had a voice like Dr. King's, a moral voice like Dr. King's, to challenge the assumptions we take for granted about law and justice. We have a criminal justice system dedicated to punishment rather than rehabilitation, to retribution rather than to restoration, and to cruelty primarily directed at people on the margins. What if we began by asking the kinds of questions Dr. King raises in his letter? Do our laws uplift human personality? Does our immigration system respect human dignity and make it possible for our immigrant neighbors to flourish, to thrive, and to experience the blessings of freedom and justice? I don't hear questions like that articulated very often in the so-called debate about immigration. I want to conclude this morning by sharing just a little of my own experience with immigration during the first Trump administration. I had the privilege of serving a congregation that built relationships and worked closely with a number of immigrant families, many of whom were undocumented. These families were hardworking, kind, caring, and simply in search of a safer and better life for themselves and their children. Most had fled horrific violence and threats to their lives and the lives of their families in their countries of origin. The stories they told were so terrifying that I began to realize that had I been in their shoes, I would have probably made the same choice they had, with or without proper documentation. I also learned that for these families, legal immigration was basically impossible. I confess that before I got to know these families, I had been one of those people who would ask themselves, well, you know, my great-grandparents, when they came over here from Poland and other places in Europe, they got in line and waited their turn and they came over here. Why can't other folks do that today? But what I soon learned is that unless you have economic resources and connections, often coming from privilege in this country, there is no line to stand in. And even if there was, it was likely to be 10, 15, 20 years long. That's a system riddled with injustice and unfairness, a system aimed at keeping people who are Black or brown and lacking economic resources out of our country. And that's why I want to make sure that as we protest and engage in acts of resistance, that we listen to, learn from, and be in solidarity with those communities who are under assault. We must always affirm and center their humanity when we hear it attacked. We must challenge respect for the law arguments and invite others to reflect on the brokenness of the current system and the injustice of our current laws. I want to encourage and invite you to remain on the Zoom after the service and to attend the important gathering being led by our Mosaic Squad. They've got some interesting and important ideas, and they want to hear from you as well. Please join us. Near the end of the letter from Birmingham jail, Dr. King turns his attention to organized religion and offers both a critique and a challenge to moderate and liberal churches, moderate and liberal ministers, congregations like ours, ministers like myself. He says that while we often profess beautiful values on Sunday mornings, we too often find it easier to remain behind, and these are Dr. King's powerful and challenging words, the anesthetizing security of stained glass windows, rather than getting outside our walls and challenging an unjust status quo. Friends, I have to say that I'm proud of the work you're doing. I believe that you are beginning to rise to Dr. King's challenge. We are getting out in the community, protesting injustice and authoritarianism, and partnering with organizations that are bringing us into relationships with individuals and families who have been and are being marginalized. Don't get me wrong, we're just at the beginning, and there is so much more we can and must do. That's why you need to come to stay for that Mosaic conversation today. That's why we need to follow Kathleen and Lenore's example by showing up and speaking out. We can do this. We can be part of a growing movement of resistance with kindness, a movement that is strong and resolute, a movement that always keeps love in the center. May it be so. Amen. And now I'd like to invite us to listen to, and if you wish to sing along with our beautiful closing hymn, which Nash will play for us, Here Together, Going Forth. A reminder, friends, after the closing words, we want you to feel free to talk among yourselves. You can unmute yourself, talk among yourselves for about 5 minutes. Then you will hear a song, which will last about 4 minutes, that will begin to play. And that will be sort of our transition into the Mosaic conversation. So please do join us for that very, very important conversation. Angela, as I deliver the closing words, would you please extinguish your chalice? These words are from Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson. She says, "We are the ones we have been waiting for. We're not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. May we be bold and courageous to chart that future, and may we have faith in a future that is not known." Thank you all so much for joining us. I am hopeful and optimistic that we will be back on Rugby Road next Sunday. So again, it's so wonderful to be with you. Amen. Again, please feel free to stay on and just visit with one another, and then we will transition into the Mosaic gathering. Amen, and blessed be.